Good day, everyone. I am Berdine E. from BESNED 1-10 to tackle about the principles of art. Imagine you're drawing a lighthouse with your favorite pen. You carefully examine where to place this lighthouse on the paper, as well as how far away to draw the sea, moon, and stars. Finally, because you enjoy stargazing and the reflection of light, you color with your favorite shade of yellow, and voila! You have created your own artwork. Without even knowing it, you have just used some of the principles of art. They include rhythm, emphasis, balance, unity, movement, harmony, variety, and contrast. The first principle of art is rhythm, the repetition of elements of art and pattern. Whatever it is that you repeat, whether it is lines, shapes, forms, by changing the size and the width, or the placement, you create a sense of rhythm in artwork. Additional information: rhythm is different from pattern. Patterns are predictable, they are the same over and over again, but rhythm is not predictable. With rhythm, things change, so even though we have repetition still happening. So let's go ahead and notice how the artist used a series of black and white sheets to create a spiral pattern in this artwork. Let's proceed to the second principles of art. Emphasis. To use emphasis is to create a strong difference in one part of the artwork compared to other parts. These artists use a different color to set one object apart from the others. So the artists are always trying to be really intentional with where the viewer's eyes goes and how the viewer's eye travel around the artwork. So if you create a focal point, for example, by making something really bright and everything else darker. Take a look at the image of tomatoes. The green tomato is mixed into the red tomatoes but does not get lost in the group. It is clearly the focal point because of a strong contrast of color.
So, balance is explained by comparing visual weight in an artwork to the physical weight of actual objects, while unity is defined as the organization of similarities between elements that make up a work of art in order to create visual and conceptual connections.
So the next principle of art is the movement. So artists use movement to direct the viewer's eye through a work of art. And it can be directed along lines, edges, shapes, and color within the work of art. There are three types of movement, which are the physical movement, juxtaposition, and moving the viewer's eye. The first type of movement is the physical movement, and it's basically the feeling of action found in the work of art. Example of this is dancing. The next one is the juxtaposition. It is actually portrays the subject in somewhat of a freeze frame. Example of this is the rehearsal on stage of Edgar Degas. So the third type of movement is the moving the viewer's eye. It deals with the way the viewer's eye moves through the work of art. Example of this is the work of Katsushika, which is the Great Wave. The next principle of art is the harmony, and it refers to how well the visual elements work together. So if there is a harmony in the work of art, the viewers will feel a sense of satisfaction while looking and observing the art.
Contrast is a principle of art who is considered by many to be the golden rule for creation as one of the primary art concepts. In essence, contrast is defined as the juxtaposition of difference which is utilized to emphasize the features of a work. Contrast in art is closely related to variation. Contrast is used to generate rhythm or to reinforce the attention of the artwork by arranging opposite aspects such as bright and dark, opposite use of the color wheel, texture, and size. On the other side, the utilizations of various qualities or examples of visual elements is referred to as variety in art. It's the polar opposite of using the elements in the same way over and over again. If you have a good design, then you use shapes, lines, and colors in your artwork, then it is already called a variety.
Art history timeline. The Upper Paleolithic Age of Man. People live in caves and survive by hunting and gathering that gradually evolved into learning how to use tools to make things. No organized government or religion, so art is made for practical purposes to help with hunt or please natural forces. Art is made from natural resources like crushed berries and rock and sticks for brushes. Art of the time, portable art during the Upper Paleolithic period was necessarily small and consisted of either figurines or decorated objects. Stationary art, it didn't move. The best example exists cave paintings in Western Europe created during the Paleolithic period. Neolithic era. Ancient humans switched from hunter mode to agriculture and food production. Advancements were made not only in tools but also farming, home construction, and art including pottery. Good evidence for religious practice, a perpetual inspiration for the fine arts. Age of Idealism, Hellenic era and Greco-Roman era. Artists explored new ways of representing emotional effects, individual experience, and ornate details. Middle Ages, the Romanesque period occurred during the medieval or Middle Ages. The Gothic era was nestled between the preceding Romanesque period and the later early Renaissance period. The word Romanesque relates to Romance and is often explained as having descended from Romans. Romanesque art was primarily an architectural style that drew from the classical Greek and Roman architectural styles. This art period did not only include architecture. However, there were other art forms like metalwork, sculpture, painting like murals and mosaic, embroidery, and stained glass. Gothic art spanned different art modalities, most notably starting with the development of churches and cathedrals, which became vehicles for many other art forms to develop. These other art forms included paintings, sculptures, stained glass windows, as well as illuminated manuscript and many other minor arts. The Renaissance era was a period of rebirth in almost the cultural and societal faculties and institutions throughout Europe, including art, science, mathematics, technology, philosophy, religion, and politics, to name a few. So, what characterized Renaissance art? Renaissance art in Italy started depicting more realism in its subject matter and moved toward more naturalism. Artists also drew inspiration from the classical era of Greek and Roman art and its values of harmony and proportion. Mannerism. A look at the ins and outs of mannerism. The word's origins come from the Italian word manneria, which means style or manner. If we go further, the term manneria originates from the Latin roots manus, meaning hand. From Old and Middle French roots, the words indicate method or way. Mannerism was a shift in perspective for many, especially within the art world. Many move away from the classical ideas of perfection and proportion that defined the Renaissance period into a more figurative and non-naturalistic approach to art.
Well, the Baroque era is the progression of art, celebrating the lives of humans over the power of the divine, continued into the Baroque era. Kings, princes, and even popes began to prefer to see their own power and the prestige celebrated through art than that of God. The over-exaggeration that classified mannerism also continued into the Baroque period, with the scenes of painting becoming increasingly unrealistic and magnificent, while the Rococo art period is the painting from the Rococo era are typical of the French aristocracy of the time. The name stems from the French word rocaille, which means shellwork. The solid form which characterized the Baroque period softened into light air and desire. Paintings of this era were no longer strong and powerful, but light and playful, while classicism is like the Rococo era, began in France in around 1770 and contrast to the Rococo era. However, Classicism reverted to earlier, more serious styles of artistic expression. Much like that Renaissance period, Classicism took inspiration from classic Roman and Greek art, while Romanticism is a form of dates that this art era occurred at around the same time as Classicism. Romanticism is often seen as an emotional charge reaction to the stern nature of Classicism. In contrast to the strict and realistic nature of the Classicism era, the paintings of the Romantic era were much more sentimental. While realism
Symbolism is the use of symbols to express or represent ideas or qualities in literature, art, and etc. So the main ideas of symbolism is that there is more than what we see. There is always a deeper meaning of every art. Art Nouveau is an art illustrations and posters, and it is common also in design inside our house. So the next one is Expressionism, and Expressionism is one of the common art style. It is an art style which the artist seeks to depict not objective reality but rather subjective emotions and responses. One of the example of this is the Puberty by Edvard Munch. Next one is the Cubism. Cubism was a revolutionary new approach to representing reality, brought different views of subjects together in the same picture, resulting in paintings that appear fragmented and abstracted. As you can see, if you look at the art style of Cubism, it is a very unique and easy to remember because of this style, because of the shapes that are put together and the figures that put together in the same picture that appear fragmented and abstracted. Next one is the Futurism. The same as the Cubism, it is also a social movement that emphasizes dynamism, speed, technology, youth, violence, and objects such as cars, airplanes, and industrial cities. One of the examples of this is the work of Alfredo, the aerial portrait of Mussolini. As you can see in the picture, there are airplanes, there are objects that are used, there are cars in the cities. It is an aerial portrait. It is a Dadaism. Dadaism was an art movement formed during the First World War and formed because of the negative reaction to the horrors and folly of the war. The art, poetry, and performance produced by Dada artists are often satirical and nonsensical.
Surrealism is an art movement and influenced by the idea of symbolism, which we can get the idea of the word itself, surreal, meaning it felt like it's impossible to happen, but it did. Surrealism is when you stare at a wet in a car window and it turns into a sand. Surrealism is an embodiment of imagination. Artists use this expression in hopes to desire the creation of our world and others. To understand new objectivity, we must know first what happened to German prior to the World War I. But that's on a different story. So, new objectivity art was representational, rejecting the avant-garde push towards abstraction, and presented an often satirical look at the corruption, inefficiency, and demoralization of the Weimar Republic. It was a searing critique of German politics and society, and to a degree of humanity itself. So, in the 1920s, the new objectivity emerged as a style in Germany as a response to Expressionism. So, as the name implies, it advocates a return to unsentimental reality and a focus on the objective world, as opposed to Expressionism's more abstract, romantic, and idealistic tendencies. Abstract Expressionism is a mid century artistic movement that emphasizes an artist's freedom to convey attitudes and emotions through non traditional and usually non representational means. So, violet, green, and red is an excellent example of chromatic abstraction. Color-filled painters were initially concerned with brush stroke and paint textures, but they soon realized that color was the most powerful communication tool. And on the other line, there were two broad groups within abstract expressionism: the so-called action painters, who attacked their canvases with expressive brush strokes, and the color filled painters who filled their canvases with large areas of a single color. For further understanding about the neo-expressionism means, in addition to what has been said, it is developed as a reaction against conceptual art and minimal art in the late 1970s. It returned to portray recognizable objects such as a human body, sometimes in a more raw, emotional way, and often utilizes vivid colors as a way of reflecting the subject's characteristics. Contemporary art will probably this is the era of art where we are most familiar with, since it tackles with the art in today's generation, and which means that the art of the contemporary is constantly evolving depending on the influence of globalization as well as the technology in recent times. Like digital art or whatsoever which involve technological things, it is considered as something on the contemporary. The pop art movement is intended to blur the lines between high art and low culture by painting or sculpting images of popular culture objects and celebrities. And one of the most significant qualities of pop art is the idea that there is no hierarchy of culture and that art can take from any source.